afternoon. Wonderful to be here with this amazing woman, Amanda. So I'd like to ask you, what would you do if you were diagnosed with a rare, life-altering disease that most doctors had never even heard of, let alone knew how to treat it? Well, Amanda Lawrie-Jones, who's with me today, has been living with scleroderma for over 35 years. And in that time, she's turned her personal experience into an extraordinary impact. And as chair of Scleroderma Australia and president of Scleroderma Victoria, Amanda leads with purpose, compassion, and determination while navigating a complex condition that's tested her in every way, including the loss of both legs. Her leadership spans government, health, and community sectors, and she's an access and inclusion consultant, an international advocate, and a strategic force in making real change for people with chronic illness and disability. Amanda's work is recognised nationally, not just for what she's overcome, but for what she's made possible for others. So today we're going to be speaking about the urgent need for funding scleroderma nurses, the gaps in our healthcare system, and why Amanda continues to show up and lead this vital work. So Amanda, thank you for being here. Let's begin.
Thanks, Kylie. I really appreciate you having me.
So I've got a bunch of questions, as you know, and I'm looking forward to going through them with you. And some of them are a bit personal, so I hope you're okay that we dive in. We have to get personal, though, when we're talking about disability and keep the stories real, don't we?
Yes.
So you've lived with scleroderma for over 35 years. So what do you wish that more people understood about this disease?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, Kylie. I think from our perspective, we have a motto. We say it's more than skin deep. And I think when we think about scleroderma, because it has the word derma in the name of it, immediately people think, oh, it's a skin condition. Whereas, it's actually bigger than that. It affects your internal organs, your lungs, your heart, your GI tract, your kidneys. And it also impacts your daily life, like with fatigue, pain, mobility, and mental health. And the other thing too is because it's such a multidisciplinary condition, it requires a whole team of specialists to manage you. And it is invisible. It's one of those invisible disabilities. And it also can be very, very life-altering.
So when we first talked about fundraising, some time ago now, and how vital it is, obviously, that you have these different events throughout the year to really make a huge impact to the money that you're raising for Scleroderma Australia. We then talked about the fact that you guys are funding scleroderma nurses, and I was a little perplexed and a little confused. So why do people with scleroderma need specialist nurses, and how is it different to seeing a GP or a rheumatologist?
Yeah, look, I think from lived experience perspective, and also from hearing from our community, I think one of the things, though, it's very hard to get a GP that understands every aspect, I think, of scleroderma, because it is such multidisciplinary. And the other point too is that most people see rheumatologists, and rheumatologists can't cover everything. Again, that multidisciplinary perspective. I think there's the nurses that. For us, why they're important. They cover not just specific care, but they also offer emotional support. They help coordinate tests and other doctors and making sure that, everything's nice and coordinated. They monitor your symptoms, and they also educate patients. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of be aware of. So that health literacy comes a lot from scleroderma nurses, especially things around like wound care. Like I remember from a personal experience where many years ago I had lots of ulcers, and randomly, different people were trying to treat these, and they didn't actually have the understanding of scleroderma and what it means when your skin is so thick and taut, and those wounds really need different care for that. And that's, again, something that the scleroderma nurses, are really, really well versed at.
So then tell me, unlike other conditions like breast cancer or motor neurone disease, scleroderma doesn't receive government funding for nurses. That blows my mind. So why is that?
Yeah, look, I think it's a long history of low public and political awareness. I don't think that, enough people have gone to their MPs and kind of really talked and advocated around this. I think it's never been, any part of national health strategy. And we just have always relied on our own community to help us, with fundraising and filling that gap. And I think, again, I'm always for encouraging our scleroderma community to get out there and, talk to your MPs. And we're open here at Scleroderma Australia for the people to contact us to say, what do I need to say and what do I need to advocate for and how do I do it? So happy for people to reach out to assist that as well.
So what does it actually mean in practical terms when you say we have to fund our own nurses?
Yeah, again, I think that's a really complex one. So I think what we do is we support the nurse salaries, which come from the generous donations and the hard work of us as volunteers. We're connected quite significantly into the Australian Scleroderma Interest Group, which is a bunch of rheumatologists and specialists in scleroderma that do a lot of research here within Australia. And I think it's really important that we kind of note that this relationship has kind of begun the journey of the scleroderma nurses. So they did start here in Victoria, where I'm located, at St Vincent's Hospital and Monash. And since then, with advocates on our Australia committee and us collaborating as states, we've kind of, slowly progressed that to put funding into other nurses throughout the country as well. And we have connected them in through the Australian Scleroderma Interest Group cohort, and that is because they do this specific study as well. So these nurses not only look after people with scleroderma, but they also help these specialists with their database and their research.
Wow. So before we talk a bit more about scleroderma nurses and how they help you guys directly, I'd really like to delve into a little bit more about your personal journey. So if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us a little about your own diagnosis journey and how that shaped the work that you do now?
Yeah, thanks, Kylie. I think from the perspective of living with it for 35 years or more, I was quite young. And I think for me, it was quite impactful. I went to support groups. However, everyone was so much older, and that was a real game changer and impact for me. Like I came across a lot of people in those support groups, met wonderful, wonderful people. But I think the aspect of how traumatized their conditions were. And then I had a couple of people, within that group that I was attending, unfortunately pass away. And it became a little bit confronting from my perspective. So I kind of backed away around anything to do with scleroderma, and I just dealt with doctors and, things that I needed to, and lived with this invisible disability for years without really fully understanding it. And I think there was a changing moment for me, with the first leg amputation that I had. It was then my disability became visible. And that aspect of, facing barriers in work, travel, daily life, I think that's where that kind of switch moved, where I was like, this is really interesting. I like to fight for fair. I like a challenge. And so for me, I then kind of progressively moved towards advocating for people with disability. So that became my generalist in my role and my career that I developed. And then it wasn't until I did a work trip to New York where randomly I was just walking along the street and there was a little flyer that I saw about a support group for scleroderma in New York. Go figure. So go figure. So I decided to go. And I met these most magnificent people. They were just delightful, had a great time. They're still really close friends now. And then I think from there, it was just, I came back to Australia and went, I'm going to reach out to Scleroderma Victoria. And so here we are.
Wow. That's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing. So let's go back to the nurses. So the nurses that you have, I understand you have them in most states, but you're still missing some states. Is that correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, ACT and Northern Territory.
So where there are nurses, how are those scleroderma nurses making a difference in people's lives? And perhaps you have a story or an example of one that sticks with you.
Yeah, I think, the one I think that I mentioned previously about the wound care, I think that was really significant from my own personal experience and journey. But I think too, it's having that person there that, you've got someone to talk to, and fill in those sort of gaps. I think from the perspective of how they coordinate our care, I think is really, really significant. And I think the other thing too, it's around the the lack of visibility about what scleroderma involves. And I think it's really important that these nurses get the credit where it's deserved, and think about the impacts that of what happens if they're not there. So things like thinking about triaging symptoms, gaps between appointments, helping support self-management of people at home, somebody to check in with. I think the other thing to kind of highlight and mention is our telehealth nurse, and I think they're especially vital for us for rural and regional areas in Australia. I think that's something really important to highlight too, that the benefit of having them. And I think, they help with the research and the continuity of care. So making sure that, we're looked at holistically and not just, a tick and flick kind of moment. And it is about, sharing, what's happening in your personal life, making sure that, you've got access to your medications and checking in around those sorts of things. I just think they're incredible. I'd be lost without them.
Brilliant. So I know, or I understand, that you've spoken to ministers, to hospitals, to funders. So what are the key barriers that you're facing when trying to get systemic support?
Yeah, I think, again, that's quite a tricky one. It goes back to that lack of awareness and visibility. As we said, all of our scleroderma associations in Australia, we're all volunteers. And I think from that perspective, it's really difficult to, have the condition and have the energy, time to actually advocate. I think that's something that, people don't really understand about that visibility. But, I've got a really good news story around what's happening in the ACT at the moment. So, we've had a support group leader that, approached us around lack of care and the lack of rheumatologists and the shortage within the ACT specifically in this scenario. And we decided to really kind of lift our game and do some advocacy. And we've now left it, like we've put together all the documentation, the speaking notes, all the sorts of things that we want to advocate for. But the support group themselves have actually approached Parliament and their MPs directly and set up some meetings and really had conversations and spoken to them about it. So I think we're going to be heading in the right direction now, where we can potentially start knocking on more doors. But I think that, from our perspective, we still need to keep them going now. Knocking on MP doors will take some time for traction to happen. But I think right here, right now, I think continuing that funding still needs to happen.
And when you point out that it's volunteers that are the ones that are needing to do this door knock and shout it out and let everybody know what's going on, that must just be one of the most challenging parts of it.
Oh, look, I think it is. But I think at the same time, I think, for most people with scleroderma that I meet, there's a sense of resilience about them. I think it might come back to that complex condition where we're so multidisciplinary. We never know what's going to get thrown at us each day. So I think from that, I think there's a sense of resilience within us that really wants to create change, support each other, and make a difference. I think that it comes from something inherently within us that, we do want to be there to support each other and help each other out.
Brilliant. So there's a national shortage of rheumatologists. So how do nurses help bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think triaging what's going on with someone in between an appointment. I think that's something that can really help reduce hospitalisation or progression of the condition, and I think that's something that is absolutely key. Um, Helping with self-management, so thinking about, how do they connect in with other services, and making sure that, they're not left to deal with scleroderma by themselves. And I think, again, going back, I already said it, but about that continuity of care and making sure that the scleroderma journey, which, is very different for everyone, but it's still at the centre of everything that happens with our scleroderma community.
Thank you. So what is going to happen if enough, let me start that one again. What will happen if we don't raise enough funds to keep these nurses in clinics and on telehealth?
Yeah, unfortunately, that we might lose our precious nurses. We do need to sustain this. We get no government funding. We are a not-for-profit organisation. We are all volunteer-led, and we do this through our connections in the Australian Scleroderma Interest Group. But at the same time, there's pressure already on stretched rheumatologists. We don't have enough of them. I think there'll be delayed treatment, more hospitalisations. Our research will slow down because we don't have that capacity in-house of the nurses assisting with that. And I think our rural people will be left behind without support.
Oh, well, this is a big push then for raising some funds. We've got World Scleroderma Day coming up. So what's your hope for this campaign, and how can people help other than donating money, obviously?
Yeah, I think the important thing to note here is I think Snuggle Up to me is about warmth, comfort and community. And I think, if people want to embrace our Snuggle Up campaign, I think it'd be really, really great to, share our stories and our posts, create your own story. They can, host an event, so they can do a little Snuggle Up event, so where they get in their favourite hats, gloves and scarves, watch a movie, invite some friends around and do some donations and fundraising that way. You could even do it online if you don't want to leave your house. Every single donation helps. It will all contribute towards these wonderful nurses that we have so that we can keep going in this work.
Brilliant. Those are some really great ideas. I love the idea of a pajama party and mix that with a tea party. That sounds loads of fun. Cucumber sandwiches.
Or a champagne party.
Yeah, that sounds good too. So you lead both Scleroderma Australia and Scleroderma Victoria. So what drives you to keep doing this work, especially when the challenges medically will keep coming at you?
Yeah, look, I think for me, I think first and foremost, it's the people. It's about their strength and their stories. And I think, I want people's voices to be heard. I want to be able to share those voices or help them share their voices. I think it's really important that we put that lived experience at the very forefront. And I think, that helps me do that, like in leading this organisation. And I think that, in knowing that there are gaps out there in supporting people with scleroderma, I think that, there's this chance of advocacy to really help change in care and awareness of the condition as well. And I think, the last point on that one is about hope. I've been there. I know what it's like to go through this scleroderma journey. And so I'm hoping that one day no one will have to fight this hard.
Yes, absolutely. So if you could change just one thing tomorrow to improve the lives of people with scleroderma, then what would that be?
One thing. I know there's about 10. I think from my perspective, I think more support from our government I think, to fund access to specialist scleroderma nurses. I think that's really important. I think they really do transform care. I think that personal experience, they reduce hospitalizations, they bring, this sense of dignity, and they also, again, link back to that hope that, things will get better and they've got the support there that they need.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you would like to share that you can get your voice out there, heard on a particular thing?
Yeah, I think when it comes to advocacy and our community, I think I really want to hear more voices of people's stories and making sure that, we get that lived experience through. And, I'm happy to support anyone that wants to talk to their MPs around creating change or government funding or anything that they need to do from that perspective. Really reach out to us and we can absolutely support in trying to advocate for change.
I absolutely second what you're saying there, because we don't know what we don't know. So if we don't hear from more people sharing their stories, then we can't know how we can best help or
Absolutely
what's needed. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for your time and for your energy and for sharing so openly. Your leadership and your lived experience and your advocacy are absolutely extraordinary, and we're so grateful for everything that you do. So if you've been watching and thinking this matters, it does. However, without government funding, these nurses would not exist without community support. So please, if you can, donate today, donate tomorrow, donate the next day. Help us fund more scleroderma nurses, because everyone deserves access to the care that they need. And you can find the link below. And remember that every dollar really does matter. Thank you.